So parents, are you concerned about how vaping is sweeping the nation and it might get to your kids? Well, my name is Kriya Lendzion. I have been a middle and high school counselor for over 20 years. I'm an addiction and prevention specialist, a drug educator, and a family and parent coach. So let's talk about vaping.
You're listening to the smartsocial.com podcast. Each week, we help parents and educators keep students safe on social media so they can someday shine online. Before we get into today's program, make sure you join our newsletter to get the most up-to-date social media alerts at smartsocial.com/newsletter. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we send out the latest social media app resources that help parents and educators to navigate this challenging landscape with their students. Now let's get to the program. Kriya, it's so great to have you here today. You've been a guest at Smart Social before, and we admire you because you have a lot of energy and, more importantly, a lot of knowledge here on this topic. So I've got just a few questions that I think are on parents' minds and on their hearts right now.
Okay.
First, why is vaping so popular? And that will lead into what we're going to talk about next.
Yeah. So I think we can blame a lot of it on marketing, honestly. I mean, yes, kids are curious. It's what their brains are naturally doing. But what happened with vaping, and I think it was really in 2016, 2017 when, and Juul started the game largely. I got to name names, but they deserve it. And because vaping had been around for a while, right? Electronic cigarettes, e-cigs had been developed supposedly to help chronic, heavy adult smokers not die. Right. So the intention seemed to be good. And then several years later, when they discovered that whatever those conversations were behind the scenes, and they started coming for our young people with advertising that used people that looked like them, that were very young and wearing funky clothes and nose piercings and spiky hair. And they advertise with using the values that are really adolescent versus adult values. So rebellion and freedom and kind of general badassery, and sexiness and coolness, which are things that I could care less, probably Josh could care less about most of those things, but the average 16-year-old really, really does, and 14-year-old. So they advertise with all of those images. They got the influencers, the people on Instagram and people in social media accounts to be using their products and talking about their products, which is really all that they needed for them to catch on with our young people. And unfortunately, we were not watching. Because if we're not plugged in to where they're plugged in and we don't know what they're consuming, you kind of snuck in that back door and got to them without us protecting them from it. There has been some back down of that, but meanwhile, it got its traction. So now for them to know, okay, there's all these amazing flavors and it doesn't feel like you're doing anything awful to yourself like a cigarette does. It doesn't offend anybody with the smell. It doesn't get on you. You can be stealthy and sit in class and vape and blow it down your sleeve or in your bedroom without your parents noticing. And that makes it easy. And they have this perception that it's harmless because it doesn't feel bad and there hasn't been decades of research and, showing what it does yet.
So let's talk about that. So we know they're marketing to kids, and this has been an age-old thing. Back in the day, marketing beer, cigarettes were so bad that they said I don't think I was around when this happened, but they stopped allowing people to run TV ads on cigarettes. All right, they were so bad. Nothing against anyone if they smoke, but now vaping is a whole new world for them. So you are an addiction specialist. You work with middle schoolers. You've worked with high schoolers. You have a lot of energy and knowledge. Here's what I want you to dive in. For every parent listening to this, is vaping that bad? I don't know. I think my kids will say no to it. I want you to talk about the addictive qualities. Yeah. Some of it, I think, forgive me if I get this wrong, some of it has nicotine and some of it has THC. I think you can put THC in it. I want you to dispel some rumors. Talk to us about how very addictive this is.
Okay.
I understand that if you try it, there's a percentage that you might get addicted to it. Please teach us.
Okay. So nicotine, and this is part of what led to them getting sort of grabbed by the jugular with it too, is that like sneaky was because we did a great job with public service announcements and health classes. And like everyone knows now that cigarettes kill you, right? And so that plummeted. We've got half of the amount of people smoking that were smoking 15 years ago. This is amazing, including youth, right? But so then here comes this product that just seems in all these ways like not to be harmful. And nobody talked about the dangers of nicotine in and of itself. We talked about the dangers of smoking. When they surveyed kids that right in the height of when Juul exploded, and 1 out of 5 kids were carrying them around in their back pocket. Because it really, I mean, in 3 years, they exploded. And they surveyed those kids. 3/4 of them didn't even know that they were intaking nicotine. They didn't even know that there was nicotine in vapes. They're like, it's just mango, right? So what we know now about nicotine is, yes, most addictive substance on the planet. So for a kid that is 14, half of them, that's the stat, is that half of them that pick it up and try it are likely to get addicted to it. No other substance works that way. The stats aren't that high. Things usually have to be repeated and repeated. Nicotine creates receptors for itself in the brain, literally. So they're sitting there with all these little pods going, feed me, right? So that's why cravings are so strong. It also, whereas like you take a drug like cocaine, for example, right? Or alcohol, right? Where it impacts a couple different neurotransmitters, like the chemicals in the brain, the feel-good chemicals, or opioids, right? That hits our, the pain killing chemicals in the brain and amps those up. Cocaine amps up, the adrenaline, the dopamine. Now, what nicotine does is it amps up about 13 different neurochemicals in feel-good ways, in much more subtle ways. So somebody just feels better when they have it in their system without feeling high, which means it has a super addictive quality. That part of it is that the withdrawal sucks. So when it takes hold of the body and somebody tries to go off of it, and in my coaching practice right now, a large portion of my clients are nicotine addicted teens right now. We're like, they never meant to be addicted. They were just having fun in the bathroom at school. So when they try to go off of it, the reason it feels so crappy, why 7% of people that try to quit nicotine make it more than a week, is because it's hitting all those neurochemicals and making you feel just good enough in all these different little ways that you don't quite notice, right? Like a little bit of energy, a little bit of relaxation, a little bit of, like stress relief, a little bit of this, that when you take it away, you feel off across the board. Mood wise, body aches, trouble digesting, like everything seems to kind of go upside down just enough to feel uncomfortable, right? When an adolescent is using nicotine, it damages the part of the brain that produces serotonin long term. So that means that we see nicotine users who started as adolescents with higher rates of depression and anxiety, particularly depression. It literally can exacerbate or cause some mood stuff. Interferes with healing. Whether it's like a runaway zit or a broken arm, or you're more likely to get the flu and have a worse one when you're consuming nicotine. And here's a crazy thing, Josh, is that we're watching it be the ultimate gateway drug. So they're starting to see in some of the research that they've done is that when an adolescent in particular, because let's keep in mind that their brains are like molding clay, right? What they're doing, what's firing is wiring right now, like no other time in their lives, when they're like 11 to 15, 16 in particular. Yeah. So that adolescent nicotine users, again, are 10 times as likely to become alcoholics. That's insane statistic. And they're watching that happen with THC as well. But it looks like that it's making some changes in the brain that are priming the reward pathway to be addictive to other things, which is really
so
fascinating.
Interesting. When I was really young, my grandma broke her leg and the doctor told her, you've been smoking your whole life. It's going to be hard to fix this. And that was because of the nicotine.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember vividly hearing that going, wow. And then the same substance that charged people's lungs is now in a cleaner form. We're going to talk about that in a sec. And I want to comment to everybody here real quick, but the nicotine is still keeping us from healing. And we all know a kid might break their arm, or my nephew broke his arm because he loves riding his bike. And right. And we even got him a little shirt that says, I do my own stunts. And it's got a little shirt with a kid with a broken arm, like not good. Please always force your kids to wear a helmet.
Right.
Always. Yeah. But I do want to talk to you about something. I remodeled my house and flipped a house a few years ago. And I remember when I walked through this disgusting house that I ended up falling in love with and remodeling it, There was one bedroom upstairs that was off limits during the tour before I bought it. And everybody watches HGTV now, so they're kind of in on this. It was like I had to get in there and make the offer and get it. Well, when I owned the home, I went into that bedroom and it was fine, but I went into the closet. And in the closet, I realized that the person, I wondered, what is the smell? It is unbearable. That person was dealing vape stuff, or he had a huge case and it had broken and fallen on the floor. And for the 3 years that I owned the house, even though I gutted the home, I repainted it, I cleaned, you wipe it down with this special stuff. That closet for the 3 years I owned it, and I'm pretty good at remodeling the home and keeping it clean and doing new flooring. It's still, every time I opened it to this moment, because it's visceral, because it's emotional, I open that door and I can still smell the vape. It smelled like a rancid peach of some sort. And I just always went, wow, I'll never vape in my life, because it just left it left that room in a way that I could never clean. Sold that house. I got rid of 99.9%, but I could smell it. And so I'll never forget, if they can do that to a closet, what's it going to do to our lungs?
Yeah.
Right?
But I want to throw this in too, Josh, is that because it's important, is that what companies are doing is they're hulkifying nicotine also. So the disposable vapes, the little ones that are the smallest, and they're little plastic, and they come in the multicolors, and there's still a bunch of fun flavors, and they're inexpensive. You know, you can buy one for $10 and you just use it and toss it. Right. But those can be from 1 pack to 3 packs worth of nicotine in one of those things. And that what they're doing, along with the pod devices, so the ones that are like the Juuls, where you buy the device and then you exchange, you refill the pods. Those two things are not using nicotine; they're using nicotine salts. And what's happened is to get by the FDA regulations, where the FDA tried to come in, not very intensely, but tried to come in and say, all right, so we're gonna clamp down on these flavors, because that's why kids are vaping, because of all these flavors. That's not why they've said they're vaping. They said they're vaping because of stress, largely. So all these flavors, and they said, okay, so you have to limit these. And so what those companies did was say, cool, then it's the FDA. So they're over the tobacco industry, right? And they were extracting the nicotine from tobacco originally. So they just said, cool, we'll just make it in a lab. So when you make something in a lab, you can do whatever the heck you want with it. So they've been hulkifying it. So what is in those little disposable ones and those pod ones, which are what kids are using almost the majority of the time, because you could stick one in your pocket and it doesn't look like anything, right? Is those are nicotine salts. And so they are about 3 times as addicting as what's in those like big tank devices and those big refillable ones that they fill with e-juice. The nicotine is getting more and more addictive.
Can you define hulkifying for everyone on the podcast right now?
Hulkifying means making it bigger and stronger, which we're seeing, like, side note, with all of the substances that we think we're familiar with as parents, the caffeine, the nicotine, the alcohol that people can get in a store, the THC is all becoming hulkified. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and stronger and stronger. The stronger something is, the faster it goes to the brain, the more addictive it is, particularly for our adolescents who are wired for habit forming and addiction like they will never be at any other time in their lives.
Let's talk about the THC. Are the people putting THC now in these? And let's talk about the impact on THC with students.
Yeah. So this is a big, big concern right now. Because I am talking to parents on a weekly basis that are dealing with their kids' extreme mental health issues that are coming out of this. So this is also not our weed. It's not natural. When it's being vaped, it's either a liquid form or it's what they call a dab, right? It's a cannabis concentrate that can look like butter or wax, or you can call it dab wax or dab, or like can look like molasses or honey, but that's some of those pens that have a heating element, and they put this tiny, tiny little bit of that in there, and then they vape it, inhale the vaporize, the vape. And then the other form is in cartridges, similar to e-juice cartridges, but they're, these carts, cartridges of liquid THC product that they are inhaling, which actually, by the way, isn't vaporizing. It is aerosol. It's particles. When it is in those forms, especially in the liquid in the cartridges, it is, let's be clear that it's not cannabis anymore. Like they have chemically extracted THC, which is one of the cannabinoids, one of the many chemicals that is naturally in cannabis, the plant. And it's the one that makes people high. It's the psychoactive one. But when it's in the plant, it's balanced by all of these other cannabinoids, all these other chemicals that have historically kept it in check, if that makes sense. So in our youth, the kids around us weren't having psychotic breaks, especially in the middle of the school day. They weren't greening out. They weren't falling unconscious or projectile vomiting in the middle of the school day, or from using. And now that's becoming a regular thing on our high school campuses in particular, to have the ambulances come in during the middle of the day because it is getting so strong.
So explain why that happens. So what you're saying, and I'm not an expert on THC or drugs in any case, we're more of the social media, and drugs are sold on social media now. And this is why we're presenting this to parents.
Yeah.
It's so important. I had an expert yesterday go, is fentanyl a part of smart social? It is now, that you can accidentally get it if your kid thinks that they can buy a Xanax on Snapchat. Now smart social is involved. So I want you to explain to people, what does it mean when students are dropping? Because a lot of parents are watching this right now and saying, not my kid will never vape, or it'll be fine. And I understand that. Maybe I'll get a letter from the government, or there'll be a light that goes on my dashboard of my car that'll warn me your oil is low and your kid is vaping. Those don't exist. So we want to get ahead of that here at Smart Social. What does it mean when kids are going into this issue in campuses? Is it because they're pulling out the THC of one strain and it's massive, and you overdo it because you have anxiety at school? What's going on there?
The THC content of the average marijuana, cannabis, the plant form that we once used, was in the 70s, was like 0.5 to 1% THC of the psychoactive ingredient. And now the average plant cannabis, marijuana, because that's the, of the cannabis plant, is average 20. It's like increased by 20 times.
So 20% is THC.
So it has like 20% THC in it. Now, the liquid and the concentrate, the dab, that what is being vaped. So not only is it not the natural plant anymore, but that is 50 to 95% THC. So those kids are starting with those. That's their introduction to thinking that they're using weed. So the bottom line is we don't have research yet, because it's a newer thing. We don't have research on what's slamming a developing brain with what's essentially like marijuana crack is doing to a growing brain. There's a lot of theories about it, because we know what the 8% stuff does to an adolescent brain. We know that it damages, it disrupts the growth of the prefrontal cortex of the frontal lobe. And it disrupts memory and processing and big picture thinking, and like ADHD kinds of symptoms, right? So executive functioning, the ability to organize your thoughts and prioritize and put yourself in other people's shoes and think about consequences and big picture. All of that is being impacted by heavy use. And now that light use of a concentrate equals heavy use, if that makes sense, right? We've got a lot of concerns about what's happening with it getting amped up, with its strength. And so when I'm talking about kids dropping and why the ER visits are exploding with use and marijuana, is that one of them is because it's so strong and it's becoming so out of balance. So again, they're vaping these like high THC concentrates that don't have CBD in it that balance it out, that don't have these other cannabinoids in it. And two things: psychosis. So kids literally losing touch with reality and not knowing what's going on and being really confused, anxious, paranoid, panicky. And then the other thing is physical health. So literally like losing consciousness or really extreme stomach, extreme nausea, extreme vomiting. And I'm working with several of my clients right now. All are like 16, 17-year-olds that were having stomach issues. And so they're using, because at one point in time, remember, it's medically prescribed for nausea effectively. That's what cannabis has been medically prescribed for. Now, when it is so intensely strong and again, out of balance, we have cannabinoid receptors in the gut. That's why it's worked for nausea. So when it's this extreme sulkified version of that, it's actually flipping and making people sick to their stomachs and develop digestive and stomach issues called hyperemesis, cannabis hyperemesis.
Let's pause for just one sec. This is all amazing. Kriya, I'm so grateful that you're here. I want to remind every parent that's here, I want to tell a story, but first I'm going to tell a little shameless plug that's going to change some kids' lives. Parents are going, how do I do this in a positive way? We have an internship here at smartsocial.com. It's a project where students get 10 questions on TikTok, Instagram, drug awareness, or anything that interests them. They run away and they ask their friends, 3 or 4 of their friends, the 10 questions, and they write down the answers. They really listen to their friends and ask them questions like, hey, have you ever seen drugs online? Or how do you know when to step away from Fortnite because you're playing it too much? And then they come back to us. They report on it in a video interview with me, and their mom is sitting in the background typically or off camera. And it is an internship that helps us learn at Smart Social to be the best at what we can be. We have a lot of ways to improve, but schools love that we're listening to real students and putting them in the program. This is a shameless plug. If your student would be a good fit to go learn and have a richer dialogue with their friends about these dangerous things, there's some good apps, there's some bad apps, and then there's some really bad substances. You can go to smartsocial.com and search for a student internship in there. Now, I want to tell you a quick story for those of you parents listening right now. Like, you know what? I don't know if this is really that big of a deal. Well, you've already turned off the podcast. So those of you that are with you, you know this. You're either a counselor, you're a superintendent, you're a director, or you're a concerned parent. Let me tell you a quick story. Every student intern, we always have a mom in the background. They're like, I love this. You're mentoring my kid. You tell, Kriya, I even did this with you. Nice loud voice. Because I'm used to that. I mentor every student with great, let's sit up straight. Headroom is correct. Awesome. You're looking good. We are speaking from in here in the chest because a lot of students need that, right? We want to be the Mr. Rogers of the internet, coaching them on how to speak clearly, right? I love that guy. Anyways, I give this unsolicited advice to every student because they always get a $25 Starbucks gift card as payment for working for us, to being an intern. Interns learn a lot and they get a little bit of form of compensation. The kids flip out. They love it. They're like, I'm going to get a gift card. And I always tell them right in front of their parents, do not buy caffeine. I don't want you drinking any caffeine. I don't want you buying any of this. And the mom's always in the back. And moms, we love you, dads, but moms are like our jam. They get us. They go, yep, see, thank you. Josh said it, don't do it. I said, yeah, you get all the snacks in the world, but caffeine will stunt your growth. Every parent gets that. We've all been told caffeine too young, it changes things. Kriya, what you're saying is just as important. And I think our job as Smart Social is to connect those dots. We know about safe driving and not distracted driving and calm driving, defensive driving. And we would never just give our kids the keys to a car and let them go, here, run, because what they'll do is they'll do donuts in the parking lot and hurt themselves or someone else. Well, the phone and any other substance is just like a car. We have to use it in a productive way. We have to watch other people use it. And we understand caffeine can stunt that growth at an early age, or maybe might not be so good for that kid to be up and disturb their ever so important sleep. Yeah. So any parents that are listening to us right now, it's so important for us to realize there's old school things that are just as the wisdom we have around old school stuff can apply. Sometimes there's a new way to look at it that might be healthier. That's why we have experts on like Kriya.
Yeah.
All right.
I just want to make sure to mention the mental health piece because that feels huge right now. Is because that's where some of the big concerns are coming in, is that what we're starting to see is, it used to be that cannabis use in adolescence, we had research that showed that if there's a predisposition for a psychotic disorder, right? If somebody down the family tree has schizophrenia or bipolar with psychosis or et cetera, then it could spark those symptoms or spark the condition. The symptoms could be worse and it would be harder to treat. It used to be just something that we would watch with kids who were predisposed. But because of how strong it's getting, because what we're seeing, particularly with vaping concentrates, is that we're seeing the development of psychotic disorders in teenagers who didn't have predisposition from heavy, regular use of these high-potency concentrates. I can't say enough about Johnny's Ambassadors and Laura Stack and the story of Johnny Stack. It's a great website to go to and explore. But they actually take youth ambassadors in to be peer educators, similar to what you're doing, Josh, because her son was a straight A student, perfect score on the SAT, playing all the sports, doing all the things. And he started using concentrates. And just because it didn't, destroy his whole life immediately, he was managing use. But it took a couple of years later, he started to struggle with depression and started to struggle with anxiety and some untrue beliefs, with the way that he was processing. And unfortunately, 2 years ago, he killed himself. Even though he backed off abuse, it was like something was tripped and he could not get right again. And that wasn't genetically predisposed for him. That was the only factor. And he attributed it to his use, that his own mental health. And that she was the first person to talk really openly about it. And now those stories are coming in, unfortunately, left and right. Like we've known for a long time that heavy cannabis use for adolescents can not just worsen depression, but cause it. And I'm being really careful with using that word, but they've done enough longitudinal research to show kids causing depression because of the places that it impacts in the brain, where it overactivates the part of the brain where you have awe and wonder and pleasure in everyday things. This is similar to the conversations that we have about overactivating dopamine systems with gaming, for example, right? If you overactivate the part of the brain where there's awe and wonder in everyday things, right? That stoner effect of being like, whoa, I can watch the leaves fall from the tree for 2 hours. And I'm entertained. Unfortunately, you overactivate that part of the brain and the brain loses the ability to do it on its own. And if you can't feel joy and pleasure in everyday things, that equals, well, now I need to use the drug to feel that. And it equals depression. That is really amping up. We already are having a youth mental health crisis. It does a lot of, and so we're watching this now be another factor that's adding to that.
Oh, you're so helpful. This is such good stuff. I'm so grateful. I want to end it on this. Kriya, a lot of parents are wondering, how do I talk to my kids proactively about this? Preventative, Smart Social is all about preventative measures. Let's get ahead of it. Let's share the scary stuff so we know why we need to do that, but let's not scare people. There is a positive, there's hope out there. But how do I talk to my kids about the impact of vaping? And I want to open this up just a little bit. How do I talk to my kids about talking with their friends about it? Because let's treat that pod, the community, the village that we're raising kids in, right? We got to go back to that. Some people are like, it's my kid, only I'll talk. Okay, that's fine. But others are like, no, this is great. This is great. My kid's learning from your kid's positive behavior.
Yeah.
How do we go back to that and talk to our kids about that benefit of making sure their friends are not trying that? What would be your advice?
Yeah, as a school counselor, the question, I get the how do I help my friend question all the time. How do I influence my friend all the time? But so starting about part one, I think, the short version is that we really let them guide. Like we stay curious and we stay non-judgmental and we stay non-reactive. And those things can be really hard for us as parents because we really want them to take certain actions and see things a certain way. And so we can tend to go into TEDx lectures about what we think, how we want them to see it, what we should do about it, what we did about it, and what our ideas about it. And they just Charlie Brown voice us and really quickly. So for one, there are opportunities if we are listening and looking everywhere to use as springboards for these discussions, unfortunately. But whether it's bulletin boards or it is the Super Bowl ad or it is, the story that's on the news or on NPR or whatever, or just for us to be like, I've heard this report today, or I saw this statistic, or I heard this thing about these concentrates. That really scares me. What are you hearing about that? I go with this rule that is like the under 5 minutes when you're not looking at each other rule to answers. So you weave it in just kind of organically when you're walking the dog or you're baking or you're fixing the car or you're shooting baskets. And you don't have to make it a big talk or the big planned talk or the big thing. Like driving by it as much as possible. It's better to have, 61-minute conversations than one 60-minute conversation about this stuff.
Oh, that's great.
So you weave it in everywhere just so you're like, this is our culture as a family. This is a norm of our families that we talk about this stuff. We're unafraid and it's just what we do, right? So weave it in, and then we have to check ourselves with one, like if we're talking more than 50% of the time, we're lecturing or grandstanding or, something else, right? Yeah. Trying to prove ourselves right and them wrong, whatever. And they're ready for adults to do that in their world. So it actually really throws a teen off in a wonderful way, or a preteen, when we approach them with curiosity about like, what do you think and feel about this? What are you hearing about this, right? What is going on around you? And then our job, after we're curious, and we come from care, but is that we don't be reactive, because all it takes is one good freak out where they feel judged or unsafe to lose
Yeah.
them, that we won't be a trusted source of guidance, information, and support on this stuff.
Oh, so true. You hit it on the head there.
And we don't have to agree. Let me be clear. Like, just if they're like, Mom, vaping's not a big deal, everybody's doing it. We don't go like, this, and this, and that's horrible, right? We are like, okay, well, that's interesting. Like, I can see why you would feel that way, with what's going on around you. Like, tell me more about where that comes from for you, And like, I've got some information that I just heard yesterday. Can I share that with you? How would you feel about it? Right? So we ask permission for that. But I think it's just the non-reacting, because the bottom line is, if they feel like they are respected, their viewpoints, are respected, they're way more likely to listen to ours and respect ours.
Yeah.
So we don't freak out, and we don't freak out when they say our friends are doing that, because they're also afraid that if they were to tell us what is going on around them and what they're exposed to and what they actually know, that we would turn that into like social suicide. We would ruin their, social world.
So I want to tell like just a quick example, and I didn't mean to do this, but adults do this too. I'm in a CEO group that helps me take smart social to the next level so we can save more lives. Like, this is my life's mission. So I'm in a CEO group, and I had to have a talk with another adult saying, hey, I come to the group and I shared something and I felt like you preached to me and it was negative, and I didn't feel like I don't feel like I can be vulnerable in the group anymore. And I want to confront you about that. Now, I'm an adult that interviews really smart people like you, Kriya, and has to navigate these waters. A kid does not know how to go, I don't have the opportunity to be vulnerable with you because I have this negative thing you snapped at me about. And quite frankly, that person had, since it's terrible, had no idea what they're talking about. And we ended up doing the right thing, but they were, in their opinion, they snapped at me. So there is this tool that we use as adults, and this might be something really fun for parents to use. It's called the Gestalt approach, and it's what we call experience share. Oh yeah, that seems valid too. And then it's really just, in my experience, I learned this, this, and this, and then that person can either pick it up. And I'm not sure if that works with students as much. I'd love to get your feedback on this. I had to have the talk with that adult, and adults will do this. Preach to other adults. You shouldn't do that. And that's fine. But it made me feel really like standoffish when I'm doing a good job at working hard, doing things the old school right way, rather than taking shortcuts. I had to have that talk with somebody, and they eventually understood. What do you like, the Gestalt approach, the experience share? What are your thoughts? Is that a permission?
Yeah.
What are your suggestions?
Yeah. So I think it's tricky, because that's another complaint I hear all the time from teenagers, is that my parent just tells me, what they've experienced, all the time, and they want to tell me the story. Now, it can be valuable and helpful because, again, it's a real modeling, and it makes us, there's an empathy in that, right? Where they can feel like, I'm not judging you. I've experienced the same, and here's what I did, or here's what happened. But we just have to be careful about not shoving it down their throats. And so just that simple asking of like, oh, wow, like I dealt with something like this, or I've had some experience. Can I share what I experienced with you? Like, would you be, interested in hearing that? But the other piece, I think, just sort of blending into that second part of your question about like, so how do you help them help their friends? If we have not freaked out over, if they're like, yeah, well, there's vaping around me. Yeah, my friends were doing this, or this happened at the party. Kids were doing this and that, or that we don't, I kept going FBI. We don't go FBI on them. We're not like who, when, where, because our concern is our kid, right? Primarily, right? I mean, yes, we can talk about, these are signs of like a problem and when you should get adult help, and we can have that conversation. But in essence, we want to know what our kids' internal and external world includes. And these tips, they apply to everything that you talk about with healthy social media and online activity too, right? I mean, you use these same skills for helping to guide them through and having discussions about all of life's crunchy, risky things, whether it's mental health, sex health, all those things can be approached this way. Is that if we have held their truths and their shares non-reactively and stayed curious and caring with them, then they are more likely to come to us to be like, wow, I'm worried about my friend, or my friends are all doing this. What do I do? Like, I want to influence them, but what do I do? I mean, they're more likely to use us and value our input and use us as support and guidance with that if we've already established those kind of ways of communicating about this stuff. It's really important to be able to brainstorm with them and plan for like those peer pressure situations, or those situations when everybody's using and they don't want to, or the person that they really like, want to be liked by, want to be included by, that substance use is happening. Right.
Yeah.
And those peer pressure conversations, again, apply to everything, because maybe their friend is going online in places that are uncomfortable with them. Maybe they're watching porn. Maybe they are gaming with violent stuff that they're not, so those skills, but we have to be curious about what peer pressure and what the social world looks like and feels like to them and sounds like. Again, we're being curious and letting them school us on their lives, and then saying like, well, how can I support you with this? I've got some ideas if you're willing to hear them. But again, they're more likely to come to us when stuff goes down that we're missing.
So much good stuff. Kriya, I want to personally just thank you for your time here today. You're always delightful. You have a great energy about this. You are positive. There's hope in all of this. Those of you parents who are wondering, what do I do to take that next step? Always remember their trusted adults are here for you. Whether it's a therapist, a counselor, a psychologist, the school is here for you. Also, don't ever forget that there may be that cool uncle or aunt that some parents are saying, hey, if you have a problem, you can go to them. I trust them with your life. If you need another trusted adult and you don't want to come to mom or dad, please consider surrounding your kids with this great village of people if you can. I want to thank everybody for listening here today. You can learn more at smartsocial.com, where school districts use a lot of our videos to educate parents, to bring them up to speed. Some of our videos are used in the classroom. We're grateful for every counselor, expert, psychologist, therapist, and superintendent and principal and everybody in between who's using our resources, or at least using our tips to really nurture students in this new world that we have. And now with AI, it's even more different than ever. So thank you, Kriya, for you, and then also for the rest of us for listening. We'll see you all very soon on the next episode. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the smartsocial.com podcast. We invite you to join the smartsocial.com VIP program. As a very informed parent VIP member, you will learn about the dangers and benefits of social media for your kids and get tips every week to keep your family safe online, and most importantly, to teach your students how to shine online. We have over 130 detailed app guides that cover apps like TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, and 100+ apps you might not have heard of, but your students may have visited or downloaded. Find out more and join today at smartsocial.com/VIP. Please remember to rate, subscribe, and review so we can continue to help more parents and educators just like you. I'm your host, Josh Ochs. As always, remember to keep it light, bright, and polite. We'll see you on the next episode. Have a great day.